We're back outside again this week. Welcome back for installment 3 of Outdoor Air Dry Clay Summer. This week, I'm going to show you 3 different beginner-friendly methods to make 3 different air dry clay dishes in 3 different styles. You'll need a good quality air dry clay that has some fiber in it. I'm using Creative Paper Clay here, but Das brand would also be a great choice for this project. I highly recommend you pick up one of these 2 brands. Links to these clays, as well as all the other supplies you'll need for this project, will be in the description box below. So let's grab our supplies and get started.
Method 1, press mold.
For our first dish here, we're going to use a press mold technique. It's called a press mold because you actually take some clay and press it into a mold. Imagine that.
I'm using this little wooden dish I found at the thrift store as my press mold. This one will make a good press mold because it's pretty wide and shallow and the sides have a nice gentle slope. We're going to use another impressive technique to decorate our bowl. So before I get started with my clay, I'm going to venture into the woods to find some leaves. Oh, we don't want to touch these guys, but these ferns will be nice. If you don't live near the woods, you can use any leaves you can get your hands on, like leaves from your houseplants or leaves from your groceries, or steal some leaves from the mall. I don't know. Of course, these ferns are covered in little fern spores on the back, so I'm trying to brush most of those off, but you'll see they still end up all over my clay. That's okay. This is going to be rustic. We're going to just embrace it. Let's set these guys aside for now and get out our clay. After I take my clay out of the package, I want to give it a little knead to soften it up. Then I press it into a pancake using the heel of my palm. I'm using my roller to flatten it the rest of the way into a slab about a centimeter thick. When you're rolling out clay, flip it over and rotate it often to get a nice even slab that doesn't stick to your work surface. Now I'm using my fingers to just slightly dampen the surface of my clay so that the ferns will stick. Then I'm pressing them down and rolling them into the clay firmly with my little wooden pasta roller. I'm thinking about composition with my leaves a little bit here and trying to arrange them nicely in an area that will fit within my little wooden press mold. When I've got my slab decorated the way I like, I'm going to set my bowl face down onto it to trace around and cut out that shape with my knife. I'm going to smooth the cut edge a little bit with my finger, but I'm not getting too fussy because I'll do the bulk of the cleanup when this is dry. Now I'm ready to do the pressing part of the press mold. I'm brushing my mold with a bit of cornstarch so the clay won't stick. We're going to center my little cutout on top of the mold and very gently and slowly, a tiny bit at a time, encourage that clay to go into the mold. You might have to lift a corner gently while you press down to let out any air you might have stuck under the clay. I'm going to make sure the clay is set down all the way into the bottom of the dish. Then I'm going to set it in a cool, shady place to dry. You want the clay to dry slowly. I know we're all always excited for our projects to dry, but if you try to rush the drying process, you might end up with a cracked dish. After a day or so, you should be able to gently tip the dish out of the mold and let it finish drying upside down. After a couple of days, you will have yourself a nice press mold made dish. Method 2, drape mold.
The second dish making method we're going to use is a drape mold. Now, this is the counterpart to the press mold, but instead of pressing clay into a mold, you're going to drape it over the top.
I'm going to use this little round sponge as my drape mold. I want to make a little ring holder, so I think this is just about the perfect size. I'm tracing this roll of tape onto the slab of clay. I'm cutting out the circle, and again, I clean up the edge a little bit, but I can sand it down when it's dry, so I'm not being too fussy. I'm centering the circle over my sponge and then gently using my hands bit by bit to coax the edge of the circle down over the drape mold. I like how the edge flares out a bit. I don't really need to worry that it's not right down touching this sponge, but I'm thinking a fluted edge could be cute, so I'm going to pinch the edge like this with lightly dampened fingers. See, isn't this cute? So again, I'm going to let this dry slowly. In about a day or so, I'll take it off the sponge, flip it over, and let it dry out completely. I'm not quite done with this one. I want to make a little post to hold the rings in my dish. The little fluted edge we made kind of reminds me of waves, so I thought I'd make a ring post inspired by my favorite ocean-dwelling creature, the kraken. So you've seen me start the tentacle with some aluminum foil. I've covered that with a thin layer of clay, and I'm spending some time smoothing that out. Then I'm making some little balls of clay, sticking them onto the tentacle with some white glue, and using a tool to push a dimple into the center of each little suction cup. Of course, you don't need to add a tentacle to your drape mold. You could make any ring post you'd like or not have a ring post at all. Anyhow, I'm setting the tentacle aside to dry too. I find it's easier to glue the pieces together when the clay is dry rather than trying to mush them together while they're still wet. Method 3, coil building.
This third dish making method we're going to use here is called the coil method. Now, for me, coil method is a bit of a misnomer because in my mind, this is a coil, but for some reason, clay people also call this long sausage of clay a coil, and we're going to use long strips of clay to build up the walls of our dish here. So I guess technically you would call this a coil method, but I do things a little bit weird.
The fun thing about this kind of dish is that you can start with any basic shape you want to. Here's a moon-shaped dish my daughter made with this method. I want to make a snake, so I sketched out this slightly chubby, simple snake shape. If you want to use this template, it is, as always, free on my website. Again, we're starting with a slab of clay, and I'm going to cut out my snake shape. Now, I could crunch all this scrap into a ball and roll it out into a bunch of coils, but I'm lazy and I find I can more easily and more quickly get a bunch of uniform coils by cutting strips out of my leftover slabs. So I'm sticking these around the edge of my snake, blending the ends together when I have to add a new bit, and then blending the coil into the edges of the snake. If you want the walls of your dish to be higher, you just repeat the process with additional layers of coils on top. Easy peasy. Here's the thing though, with this dish, you want to put it on a piece of parchment or waxed paper to dry. That clay is going to shrink when it dries, and it needs to be able to drag the surface it's sitting on with it while it shrinks. If it's stuck to like a plastic surface that won't move with it while it's drying and shrinking, it's probably going to crack. So anytime you're drying out a big flat piece of clay like this, you've got to let it dry slowly and on a surface that can move with it while it shrinks. Cleaning up the dry dishes. It's been a few days and these dishes are completely dry. I know they're totally dry because they're a uniform color and there are no areas that feel cool to the touch. If you're in doubt as to whether or not your project is completely dry, put it in the fridge for a few minutes. And if when you pull it out, there are any spots that feel especially cold, you've probably still got some moisture in there. I'm going to use the paper nail files you always see me use to clean up the edges of my projects. Just remember to always protect your lungs whenever you're sanding. If you find the bottom of your dish is a bit wobbly, you can put a piece of sandpaper down on a flat surface and then glide the dish back and forth with some gentle downward pressure until you've got a flat bottom. Until your dish has a flat bottom. Wipe the dust off your project and your work surface with a damp cloth before you move on to paint. Painting the fern dish. I want to use 3 really different styles of paint on these dishes, but starting with the fern dish, I want it to look really aged and rustic, like the dish might have fallen out of the pack of a passing hobbit, only to be found later on the forest floor. One thing that's really cool about this paper-based clay is that you can actually paint it with watercolors. So I'm just using this student set of paints to fill in the fern impression with green. This is so much easier than just trying to freehand paint some ferns, and I like how the watercolors pool in the textures left in the clay. By now, you've probably noticed all the grit left in the clay from the fern spores. I'm going to lean into that grungy aged look and slap on a bunch of tea to stain the clay. Then I'll splat on some brown, let that dry, and continue to build up the tea until it's a color I like. If you're going to use this technique, just make sure you let the paint and tea dry in between layers. The clay will start to get soft again if you let it get too wet. When the paint is fully dry, I'm going to seal the dish inside and out with a few coats of matte Mod Podge. Actually, this isn't really matte Mod Podge. I added about a tablespoon of cornstarch to a 50-50 mix of glue and water in this bottle and just DIY'd my own matte finish. Painting the ring dish. So we're going to change up the style of painting completely for the ring dish. We're going to go for a really cartoonish paint style here. I'm going to paint the dish and the tentacle piece separately and then glue them together later. I'm using acrylic craft paint and keeping the paint colors pretty bold. I'm using some bright green and purple on the tentacle. After those base colors are dry, I'm going in with a dark blue wash to make the texture really pop. I'm securing the tentacle onto the center of this dish with some 5-minute epoxy, but any strong adhesive will work. I haven't done a clear coat on this yet. I'll probably do like a glossy UV or epoxy resin finish. Those are the only finishes that I know to be reliably waterproof, and I feel like my hands are usually wet when I'm taking my rings off, so it just makes sense to use a waterproof finish. Painting the snake dish. I was trying to think of one more totally different style for this snake, and I thought it might be clever to paint my slithery snake in a look inspired by this very delicate teacup. I also had a lot of people ask me in my ghost video if you could use the quote napkin technique instead of painting on the flowers. So let's test it out. But first, I'm going to take this gold rim from my teacup as inspiration and paint the wall of my little dish in gold. I wouldn't recommend using this paint. The coverage was awful and the texture was weird. Most metallic paint has pretty poor coverage over white, so I knew I was in for at least a few coats anyways, but holy moly, I need more from my paint than this one has to offer. Anyhow, when my many coats of gold paint were dry, I pulled out my strawberry napkin. You may have seen people do this before. You lift off the top ply of a pretty printed napkin, then use some Mod Podge or watered down glue to stick it to the surface of your clay so you get a nice decorative print without having to do any tricky painting. I used my template to estimate the size of the pieces I needed and then gradually trimmed them down to fit. You can decoupage large pieces of napkin like I'm doing here, or you can cut out small pieces and put them down like stickers. There are actually no rules in napkin decoupage. And there you have it, 3 beginner-friendly air-dry clay dishes with 3 different construction methods. And heck, we even gave you 3 different styles of finishes too. Whether you're just picking up clay for the first time or you're a more experienced clay artist, I hope you found this video has helpful tips and info for your next project. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I respond to almost every comment I get here on my channel, and I'm happy to help out my viewers whenever I can. Give me a like if you found any of the tips in this video helpful. Likes make me feel all warm and fuzzy, and they also allow more people to find this video. Subscribe to my channel if you're interested in more kick-ass art on a cheap-ass budget. I post here as often as I can. You can find the template for the snake dish as well as all other kinds of free goodies over at janesawyermakes.com. Check it out, follow me on the socials, and I'll see you on the next one.